All right, take two with Noah Coslov, sports anchor, play-by-play announcer. Let's try that again, and I appreciate your good humor.
Of
How
course.
are you?
I'm doing all right. I guess right now all we can have is good humor. We need it these days. My wife and I and 5.5-year-old daughter, we left New York City about 7 weeks ago and came to our hometowns. We grew up about a mile away from each other, my wife and I. So we came to our hometown outside of Philadelphia while our folks are in Florida, and I guess are going to be down there for much longer than they had originally expected. And now we're living a suburban life. It's a bit different.
It is indeed, but I'm glad that you're in a safe spot and that everyone is healthy, thank God. So I want to ask you, I know you have a number of different irons in the fire and cover a bunch of different sports, but one that I know that you are intimately involved in, that NBA season was headed into the home stretch right before the playoffs when that decision was made to, I guess, postpone, not cancel the season. Can you share some insights? How was that decision made? What did it look like on the ground? Any idea where it's headed?
Yeah, so I think, well, nobody knows where it's headed. That's for sure. And if they were going to cancel it, they would have done it already. So nobody knows where it's headed. And I think there's so much money at stake. They'd like to get in at least a playoffs at some point, but the commissioner doesn't know. That's because doctors don't know. But the decision to shut down the season, or at least postpone and shut it down when Utah was playing Oklahoma City. So the NBA has it as a huge presence in China. So the NBA itself was aware of what was going on with coronavirus over in China and how the government was handling it or not handling it over there. And they knew that the United States was going to have to deal with it at some point. So they were aware of what was going on in their office over in China, but certainly didn't want to sound any of the alarms here because they, at that point, didn't know the toll that it would take on our country. So as soon as though Rudy Gobert, the Jazz center, was diagnosed with it, he had been sick. And that night when the team doctor ran out onto the floor just as they were about to tip in an emergency situation that nobody had ever experienced before in the NBA or really any sports. And that shut things down, and the players got really, really spooked, and the commissioner made the right decision to shut things down. And he got a lot of praise for it, Rabbi, but I think that the NBA could have taken steps further even before then. Maybe not have shut down the season, but since they knew what was going on in China and they had a feeling of what was going to be happening in the United States, I think the NBA, as much praise as they've gotten, I think they still deserve a little bit of criticism, or maybe let's not go over the top with the praise for the NBA, but at least the league shutting down got everybody else to act.
That's true. They seem to be the first. And on the subject of criticism of the NBA, the Lakers found themselves in some hot water, accepting that, I think it was a $4 million payroll protection loan. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah. You know, it made for great headlines, but I sense the reality is that they weren't going to pay LeBron with those funds.
No.
Sports is big money. Who is impacted? Who all is on the payroll? What's the financial ramification of these seasons pressing pause?
Yeah, so the league, so the Lakers themselves returned that, and I still haven't gotten a clear answer of how they even were able to apply for that loan. Like, how are you able to even apply, or and then if you do apply, how are you granted that? I mean, look at any other major corporation. I mean, the Lakers are a major corporation, but there are so many. And you saw the NBA, you saw a bunch of players donate money immediately to arena workers. So those are the ones that are impacted, I'd say, the most because they're getting the least. So those workers are contracted through the arena. So a lot of the teams don't own the arenas that they play in. They lease the arena. So is it up to the teams to be paying the arena workers? Or is it up to the folks who own the arenas and stadiums to be paying the arena workers? Those are questions that are still being hammered out between all sides. But it's all the arena workers who don't get those dates, and also all the concerts that come with it too. So it's not just sporting events. Those arenas are filled up all the time, the parking lot attendants, et cetera. And oftentimes for the arena workers, that's their second job. So the players have done a really remarkable job of stepping up, and then teams have as well. but it's those folks that are most impacted. And yes, players make millions of dollars. And I remember writing a story in ninth grade. We had to write a persuasive paper for English class, Miss Emily Roach, Abington Junior High School. And she said, write a persuasive piece, give me a pitch. And I said, why professional athletes deserve all the money they get. And she said, don't write it. Don't write it. I'm never, ever going to believe you. Don't write it. I wrote it anyway. And I gave the presentation and she said, well, you convinced me, but I told you not to write it. So here's a B. So athletes themselves make millions of dollars, but if their salaries are cut, and I'm not shedding any tears for the athletes, but if their salaries are cut, then yeah, it changes their lives also, just not on the same type of scale that it would for an arena worker or the millions of people that are out of work. So I applaud the players greatly.
Yeah, they're helping out a fair bit, which is wonderful to hear. What else? What do you hear from players? What on earth are they doing right now? I imagine they can't get into team facilities. They can't be hitting the gym. It's like hitting a treadmill and trying to stay in shape. What's going on?
Right. So they can do that. And just today, as we record this, some of the facilities have started to open up in states where you're allowed to open things up. But really, it's still only 3 or 4 players in the facility at a time, 1 player per basket. This is on the NBA side. On the I'm not as familiar with what's going on in the NHL, but on the NBA side, then the rebounder has to be wearing gloves, and then everything has to be wiped down. I mean, to have to go through all of this, then you have to start thinking, all right, so what's the point here? What are we doing here? But the surprising thing is, and I was glad that the Times had written a piece about it this week, about the number of players who just don't have access to a hoop. So many guys, especially single guys, live in downtown apartment buildings, and some don't have hoops. Sometimes there's a hoop in the gym, or maybe there's a half court at their residence, but they don't have access to it now because those types of things have been shut down. So many guys don't have hoops, and this has to be the longest that they've ever gone in their entire basketball careers, or even going back to when they were little kids, that they haven't shot a basketball. So some guys are getting creative, trying to find friends that have a gym and guys that have been quarantined and they know that things are safe and they can get shots up. But else, just to stay in shape, a lot of the teams, and I'm sure all the teams really, but the ones that I've spoken to have sent gym equipment to players' homes that don't have it. So a lot of the guys who live in apartments, they now have basically full gyms in their living rooms.
Right. Jewish sport league jokes aside, this is an area that I don't have much experience in. What's going to be the quality? Do you think these guys, is it like riding a bicycle? Are they going to be able to press go on a finals, or is it going to take a long ramp up?
Yeah, you're going to need, so players, I would say, would need a 2 to 3 week training camp again, and then another 2 or 3 weeks of exhibition games, or maybe you call that regular season games before the playoffs, but I would say exhibition games if you're just going to get into the playoffs and then play. So it is a 6 to 8 week buildup before you start playing again, because as great in shape as these guys are in, there's a difference between basketball shape and good shape. So right now they may be out of basketball shape and their bodies just aren't used to a stop and pick up again. So they're used to being in peak physical condition for these certain number of months per year. And then their workouts change in the off season where they're staying in shape and then they ramp back up into basketball shape. So right now all their bodies are saying, all right, so what is going on? I for all these years, I've been used to, we're going full speed now, but now we're shutting down. So I think there's something to look at physiologically there, but this is going to be, for the NBA, it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks for sure.
And I imagine that if we've seen a marked decline in live sports, it just can't happen. Mm-hmm. We're now looking at a potential glut, right? Usually they work so hard not to overlap with one another, but we're looking at having every major sporting league having something going at the same time. That could be a crazy period.
Yeah, it's going to be nuts. And especially during a time, if it happens over the summer, during a time when it's usually just baseball. after the NBA finals end in June. It's just baseball. And that's known as the dead period, where it's just baseball and there's nothing else. And you've seen a few other football leagues try to start and try to take advantage of that dead period. But really, that period doesn't work for so many other sports and for TV ratings, because in the summertime, people are outside, people are traveling, people are going every which way. But maybe now this summer, if people are not doing that or simply not allowed to do that, maybe then that changes the equation for just this time, but maybe not moving forward. I mean, right before college football season starts or the NFL, everything is so up in the air, and every league faces so many different challenges, but TV money speaks volumes.
Absolutely. You know, your world has been turned upside down in all of this as well. We were talking before, you're now in Philadelphia. Your travel schedule has been massively cut off. You were on the road getting ready to cover some NCAA games when the tournament was canceled. Say more about the impact on college athletics.
Yeah, so from my own experience, I'm on the road usually like 80, 90 nights a year, I guess. And it was March 12th. I was in Frisco, Texas for the Conference USA basketball tournament. And so this was the 12th or 13th. There was that Thursday. We had 4 games that day for Stadium, the quarterfinals, men's and women's. And Conference USA, I think, was waiting for, I personally believe they were waiting for the bigger conferences in their neck of the woods, the ACC, the SEC and the Big 12, to make a move to cancel their tournament before they did something. So we were about 5 minutes before tip-off. We recorded our open. I'm thinking, what are we doing here? How are we going to play this game? But you had to prepare for it. And then 5 minutes before tip, they said, we're shutting down, just after the SEC did and the Big 12 did. So there goes that. And then there goes the NCAA tournament about a week later. And that accounts for about 85% of the NCAA's operating budget, just the NCAA tournament. So, and no one's crying for the NCAA with all the money that they have, but not having college basketball, not having college football, you know this from going to Ohio State, the football program, as flush with cash as they are, and the elaborate spends that they make, which are oftentimes outrageous when you think about it being a college sport and quote unquote student athletes, but they fund nearly every other college athletic program at those universities. So without college football, or without college basketball on the biggest of scales, but college football mostly, now you're going to start to see that trickle down effect where soccer programs are going to get cut, tennis teams are going to get cut, golf teams are going to get cut, and then it impacts everybody else. Not to mention, not just the student athletes there, but the communities that the schools are in. So college football weekends, those 6-7 home games account for a large majority of the income that the hotels make throughout the year, the bars, the restaurants. It is going to be, this isn't just if one season is gone, then we pick up the next season and off we go. This is going to be felt for years.
Wow. So what scenarios are you hearing? What possibilities, what does eventual reopening look like? I realize that the time is indeterminate, but what different scenarios are people gaming out? What could be possible?
I think it's pretty popular to talk about it on the NBA side of the NBA in a bubble. So play in Disney World, where the courts are already set up and there's broadcast set up and you can have private hotels, etc. But and you can think of any scenario, and every league has thought of every single scenario. But until there is mass testing and testing enough for everybody who need it, then they're not going to be restarting. So I do know that the NBA, at least, they are not testing asymptomatic folks. So until you're able to do that with all your players, then you're not going to be restarting, because they're not going to be taking away tests from anybody else. And any league that does that is in for a massive PR nightmare. You shouldn't do it. And I know the NBA is not going to do it. So every single scenario that all these organizations have thrown out, all the sports leagues have thrown out, it's all with the caveat of when we get testing for everybody. So until we have that, we've got nothing, and we're nowhere close to that.
Right. a question from somebody who is listening to us online. Let's talk baseball for a minute. What are you hearing out of the baseball world about when their season might potentially begin?
Again, it's the same thing. But I do think without the testing, but I do think baseball is being smart of thinking outside the box and thinking with, all right, let's go with a few of these divisions to limit travel. So you could have, throw out the National League and the American League and the East and all the divisions. You can have, the Phillies and the Yankees in the same division, and they can be close. So you do limit the travel, and forget fans. We're going to have sports in stadiums and arenas playing long before we have fans there watching them. It's just going to be a much different experience. But again, until there is testing everywhere, we're not going to have this, because there are going to be players who say, well, all right, so now we need to be quarantined for X amount of time before we get together on the field and play and get our teams back together. Well, I don't want to leave my family. I'm not going to leave my kids and significant others to be dealing with everything else that's going on their own. So you're going to have pushback, I think, from players associations also. And then what happens if one player comes down with coronavirus? Then what? Then you're going to shut down again. And then we're going to go back into this never ending cycle. So I don't know how they're going to be able to pull that off, but I applaud them for getting creative and thinking of different ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So turning personal for a moment, you mentioned you're on the road for 80 to 90 nights a year. That has fallen off a cliff, but you've got a hand in a number of different things. What is keeping you busy as a sports personality right now? What are you working on?
Oh, just talking to rabbis all over the country. That's how I spend my day. I'm kindergarten teacher now for Eden. So that is a lot of fun. This is certainly time that, I'm used to being gone most weekends and then usually a night or two during the week. And this time this is a joy for me. And I'm trying to get her to understand that I'm dad, but now I'm teacher. And she's been terrific. We are blessed with just an outstanding kid who's great to be around. So that's been taking up a lot of my time, a lot of podcasting, Rejecting the Screens, an NBA podcast. We do that twice a week, talking to lots of former NBA players. You're a Seattle guy. We had Vin Baker on this week, and that episode comes out tomorrow. So a lot of former NBA players, media members, et cetera. So we do that twice a week. Get that wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, there's a podcast called The Follow-Up, which is just quick conversations, 15 minutes with friends of mine in any sort of walk of life, just proving that you can have a conversation with anybody and make it interesting by asking one question, then actually listening and following up appropriately, as you have done on your end here. And then also I handle media marketing for an NBA player, Mo Bamba, who is the center for the Orlando Magic, and building up that side of the business with some former players and coaches who want to get into broadcasting. So yeah, there are a bunch of other projects, some over-the-top OTT projects that I'm working on as well. So there's all sorts of things that you can do. It's just a matter of, the financial side of things is certainly different. I can't be in studio for CBS Sports HQ. I can't be out on the road calling games for CBS Sports Network or Stadium. So you're trying to figure it out in different ways. So it's a challenge, but it's one that I've certainly embraced and prepared for by trying to learn so much about the other things that go on in sports aside from just calling games.
Amazing, just the number of different things you are doing. And I encourage people to tune into all of them. Now, we got one last question that I want to ask. It's something that I had never thought about. Switching to the NHL, where potentially, right, there people coming to the arena, their ticket sales are a better source of revenue than more limited TV markets. Mm-hmm. That seems like it will have a major impact, right? Whereas baseball might be able to televise games and get people to tune in, and football certainly could do that. NHL, maybe not as much. How's that going to play out in a less lucrative league? What additional considerations are they looking at?
Yeah, I think on the NHL side, they have such a fervent fan base and they sell out all over the country, but the TV ratings are so much lower than so many other places. But like in Pittsburgh, they sell out. Penguins are a huge draw. So maybe if fans can't be in there, then TV ratings go up. And I think it's all going to be dependent on where they end up playing this season, and are folks still inside, or are folks deciding to get out and travel? So it's certainly going to, all of this is going to impact the salary caps on all these teams, and league revenues are going to go down, and it's going to affect player salaries. But again, nobody's crying for the players here. But I do think the NHL's, I think their TV agreement is up. I think it's in 2 years. So if they can get creative and figure out a better way to put on a TV product, then this is certainly the time. But the NHL has always been a tough watch on TV, even if Doc Emmerich's calling the games, who I think is the best play-by-play guy in any sport. But hockey in person is the best. Hockey on TV is a tough watch.
I'm so grateful for your time, Noah. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for the work you are doing. Stay safe, stay sane. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you do the same. Thank you, Rabbi.